Admiral Zara Thorne stood before the massive viewscreen in the command center of the GSS Determination, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she studied the debris field stretching endlessly through space. What remained of the Draconian Empire's Fifth Fleet drifted in twisted metal fragments, some pieces still glowing from whatever force had torn them apart 3 days ago. "Ma'am, we're receiving the final sensor readings from the probe deployment," reported Lieutenant Commander Hayes, his voice carrying the same unsettled tone that had plagued the entire crew since they'd arrived at these coordinates. "The data, it's unlike anything we've encountered before." Zara turned from the viewport, her steel-gray eyes reflecting decades of military service and countless battles against humanity's enemies across the galaxy. The Draconian Empire had been humanity's most persistent threat for over 2 centuries, their superior technology and ruthless tactics making them nearly unstoppable. Their fleets had burned human colonies, enslaved entire populations, and pushed the Terran Federation to the brink of collapse more times than anyone cared to remember. But this was different. In 72 hours, an entire Draconian battle fleet had simply vanished from existence, leaving behind only scattered debris and a mystery that threatened to upend everything they thought they knew about galactic warfare. "What kind of readings are we getting, Hayes?" Zara asked, moving to the central command console where holographic displays showed the extent of the destruction. The Fifth Fleet had been one of the Draconian Empire's most powerful formations, consisting of 3 dreadnoughts, 12 heavy cruisers, and over 40 support vessels. Nothing in the known galaxy should have been capable of destroying such a force so completely. "Energy signatures are off the charts, Admiral," Hayes replied, his fingers dancing across the control interface as data streams flowed across the displays. "We're detecting residual particles that don't match any known weapons technology. The molecular breakdown patterns suggest the ships weren't just destroyed, they were unmade." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Unmade. As if the very atoms that comprised the Draconian vessels had been convinced to stop being what they were. Zara had seen the aftermath of nova bombs, antimatter warheads, and even the mythical planet crackers that certain alien species were rumored to possess. None of them left signatures like this. "Any sign of survivors?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. They'd been scanning for 3 days without detecting so much as an escape pod or emergency beacon. "Negative, ma'am. Whatever happened here, it was instantaneous and absolute." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the expedition's chief xenobiologist and Zara's oldest friend, approached the command station with a tablet in her hands and concern etched across her features. "Admiral, I've been analyzing the debris patterns with the archaeological team. There's something you need to see." Elena activated a 3-dimensional projection that showed the debris field from multiple angles, highlighting specific areas where the destruction seemed to follow particular patterns. "Look at this distribution. The way the ships were torn apart isn't random. There's a deliberate methodology to it, almost like surgical precision." Zara studied the projection, her military mind immediately grasping what Elena was showing her. "You're saying this wasn't just raw destructive force? Someone or something systematically dismantled an entire fleet?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. And there's more." Elena manipulated the display to show energy residue patterns. "We're detecting traces of what appear to be communication frequencies embedded in the destruction itself. As if whatever did this was trying to send a message." The implications sent a chill down Zara's spine. The Draconian Empire had been humanity's greatest threat precisely because of their technological superiority and military doctrine that showed no mercy to lesser species. If something could destroy their most powerful fleet formations with this level of precision and apparent ease, what did that mean for the rest of the galaxy? "Ma'am, we're receiving a priority transmission from Terran Command," announced the communications officer. "Admiral Chen wants a full briefing in 30 minutes. Zara nodded grimly. Admiral Chen commanded the Terran Federation's Deep Space Defense Force, and if he was calling for an emergency briefing, it meant this situation had already escalated beyond a simple investigation. "Patch me through to the fleet, Hayes. I want all senior officers in the briefing room in 15 minutes. As the crew hurried to comply with her orders, Zara found herself staring back at the debris field. 3 days ago, this had been one of the most feared military formations in known space. The Draconian Fifth Fleet had been responsible for the destruction of the Proxima Colony, the siege of New Geneva, and countless other atrocities against human worlds. Now it was nothing more than cooling metal drifting through the void. The briefing room filled quickly with the senior staff of the GSS Determination and the accompanying research vessels. Captain Morrison from the survey ship Endeavour looked particularly grim as he took his seat, while Commander Torres from the escort frigate Vigilance kept checking her tactical displays as if expecting an attack at any moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Zara began, standing at the head of the conference table while the main display showed the debris field analysis. "What we're dealing with here appears to be a complete paradigm shift in galactic warfare. The Draconian Fifth Fleet, which we all know was capable of reducing entire star systems to rubble, has been eliminated by an unknown force using technology we can't even begin to comprehend." Captain Morrison leaned forward. "Admiral, my team has been running simulations based on the debris patterns. The energy requirements for this level of destruction would be astronomical. We're talking about forces that could potentially crack planets or destabilize star systems. Which brings us to our primary concern," Elena added, activating additional data displays. "If this force was responsible for destroying the Draconian fleet, what are their intentions? Are they hostile to all spacefaring species, or was this specifically targeted at the Draconians?" Commander Torres spoke up from her position at the tactical station. "Ma'am, I've been monitoring long-range sensors since we arrived. There are no signs of any vessels or installations that could have been responsible for this attack. Whatever did this either left the area immediately afterward or possesses stealth technology beyond anything in our databases." Zara absorbed this information while considering the broader implications. The Terran Federation had been locked in a bitter war with the Draconian Empire for generations, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. Human ingenuity and determination had proven effective against Draconian technology and numbers, but it had always been a struggle for survival rather than victory. Now, suddenly, one of their most powerful fleets had been eliminated by an unknown third party. It was the kind of development that could either save humanity or doom them all. "Dr. Vasquez, what's your assessment of the communication frequencies you detected?" Zara asked. "Could this be an attempt at first contact?" Elena consulted her tablet before responding. "It's possible, but the patterns are incredibly complex. We'd need weeks or possibly months to decode them properly. What worries me is that the frequencies seem to be embedded in the very fabric of the destruction itself. Whoever did this has a level of technological sophistication that makes our most advanced systems look primitive." The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the magnitude of what they were facing. For centuries, humanity had defined itself in opposition to alien species that sought to dominate or destroy them. The Draconian Empire represented the ultimate expression of that threat, a civilization that viewed humans as nothing more than resources to be exploited or obstacles to be eliminated. But now there was something else out there, something powerful enough to erase Draconian fleets from existence with apparent ease. The question that haunted Zara was whether this new force would view humanity any differently than the Draconians had. "Admiral," Hayes called out from his station. "We're receiving that priority transmission from Admiral Chen now." The main display flickered and resolved into the image of Admiral Marcus Chen, his distinguished features showing the strain of command during humanity's darkest hours. Behind him, Zara could see the bustling activity of the Terran Defense Command Center on Luna. "Admiral Thorne," Chen began without preamble, "I need your assessment of the situation immediately. We're receiving reports of similar incidents across 3 other sectors. Draconian fleets are disappearing, and we need to know if we're looking at a new threat or a potential opportunity." Zara felt her blood run cold. If this wasn't an isolated incident, if multiple Draconian fleets were being eliminated simultaneously, then they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. "Admiral, based on our analysis, we're dealing with technology that far exceeds anything in our current understanding. The precision and thoroughness of the destruction suggests a level of capability that poses a potential threat to all spacefaring civilizations." Chen's expression grew even more serious. "That's what I was afraid of. Admiral Thorne, I'm authorizing you to expand your investigation. Use whatever resources you need, but I want answers. If there's a new player in galactic politics with this kind of power, we need to know their intentions before they decide humanity is their next target." "Understood, sir. We'll begin extended reconnaissance operations immediately." "One more thing, Zara," Chen added, his voice dropping to a more personal tone. "The President is breathing down my neck about this. The possibility that our greatest enemy is being eliminated by an unknown force has certain political implications. Some people see this as humanity's salvation, while others view it as an existential threat. I need you to be very careful about how you handle any contact situations that might arise. After the transmission ended, Zara stood in the briefing room surrounded by her senior staff, each of them grappling with the enormity of their situation. They were potentially facing first contact with a species whose technological capabilities dwarfed anything humanity had ever encountered, and they had no way of knowing whether that contact would be peaceful or catastrophic. "All right, people," Zara said finally, her voice carrying the authority and determination that had carried her through decades of military service. "We have our orders. I want round-the-clock analysis of all debris and energy signatures. Dr. Vasquez, I need your team to prioritize decoding those communication frequencies. Commander Torres, I want tactical assessments of potential defensive strategies, even though I suspect they'll be academic at this point." As her officers dispersed to carry out their assignments, Zara remained in the briefing room, staring at the display showing the remains of the Draconian Fifth Fleet. Somewhere in that twisted metal and cooling plasma lay the answers to questions that could determine humanity's future in the galaxy. For 2 centuries, humans had fought against alien oppression with courage, ingenuity, and an unbreakable will to survive. Now they faced the possibility of encountering something so far beyond their current understanding that all their previous struggles might seem trivial by comparison. But Zara had not risen to the rank of admiral by backing down from impossible challenges. Whatever force had destroyed the Draconian fleet, whatever intentions lay behind those embedded communication frequencies, humanity would face this new chapter with the same determination that had carried them through every previous crisis. The debris field continued to drift through space, carrying its secrets and its warnings, while the crew of the GSS Determination prepared to uncover truths that would reshape their understanding of their place in the cosmos. 24 hours after Admiral Chen's urgent transmission, the investigation had expanded into the largest joint scientific and military operation in Terran Federation history. 3 additional research vessels had arrived at the debris field coordinates, along with 2 heavy cruisers and a full squadron of reconnaissance fighters. The magnitude of resources being committed to understanding what had happened here spoke volumes about how seriously Earth's leadership was taking this development. Dr. Elena Vasquez had barely slept since beginning her analysis of the mysterious communication frequencies. Her laboratory aboard the GSS Determination had become a maze of quantum computers, signal processing equipment, and holographic displays showing complex mathematical patterns that seemed to shift and evolve even as she watched them. "Admiral, I think we've made a breakthrough," Elena announced over the ship's communication system, her voice carrying excitement tinged with apprehension. "You need to see this immediately." Zara arrived in the laboratory within minutes, finding Elena surrounded by displays showing what appeared to be 3-dimensional geometric patterns that pulsed with an almost hypnotic rhythm. The patterns were beautiful in their complexity, but there was something about them that made Zara's military instincts prickle with warning. "What am I looking at, Elena?" Zara asked, studying the shifting patterns that seemed to contain layers upon layers of meaning. "These are the decoded communication frequencies, but they're not what we expected," Elena replied, manipulating the display controls to highlight specific elements. "Initially, we thought we were dealing with some kind of linguistic communication, maybe mathematical concepts or scientific data. But this is something entirely different." Elena activated a new display showing a comparison between the patterns and various known forms of communication. "These frequencies aren't trying to convey information in any traditional sense. They're more like signatures. Markers left behind to identify who was responsible for the destruction." Zara felt a chill run down her spine. "You're saying this was a calling card? Someone wanted us to know they were responsible." "That's exactly what I'm saying. But here's the truly disturbing part." Elena brought up another set of patterns, these ones darker and more ominous in their geometric complexity. "We've detected similar signature patterns in historical data from other unexplained incidents over the past 50 years. Ship disappearances, colony failures, entire star systems going dark with no explanation." The implications hit Zara like a physical blow. "You're telling me this force, whatever it is, has been operating in our galaxy for decades? That what happened to the Draconian Fifth Fleet isn't their first action? I'm afraid it's worse than that." Elena's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Based on the mathematical progression of these signatures, I believe we're seeing an escalation pattern. They've been testing their capabilities, learning about different species and their technologies. The Draconian fleet destruction wasn't a random act of violence. It was a demonstration." Before Zara could respond, the ship's alarm system activated, flooding the laboratory with flashing red lights and the piercing wail of an emergency alert. The Admiral's communication device crackled to life with Hayes's urgent voice. Admiral Thorne to the bridge immediately. We have incoming contacts, unknown configuration, approaching from multiple vectors. Zara ran through the corridors of the GSS Determination, her mind racing through tactical possibilities. If the force responsible for destroying the Draconian fleet had returned, her small research task force would be helplessly outmatched. Their only hope would be to gather as much intelligence as possible before meeting whatever fate awaited them. The bridge was a scene of controlled chaos when she arrived. Officers moved with practiced efficiency, but she could see the tension in their movements, the way their eyes kept darting to the tactical displays showing the approaching contacts. Report! Zara commanded as she took her position at the central command station. Ma'am, we have 12 contacts approaching from different directions, Hayes reported, his fingers flying over his console. They're not showing up on conventional sensors, but the gravitational distortion detectors are picking up massive signatures. Whatever these ships are, they're big. Commander Torres looked up from the tactical station, her face pale. Admiral, the approach patterns are too coordinated to be accidental. They're moving to surround our entire task force. If they maintain current course and speed, they'll have us completely boxed in within 18 minutes. Zara studied the tactical display, her experienced eye immediately recognizing the classic encirclement maneuver. But there was something different about the way these contacts were moving. Their approach was methodical, almost careful, as if they were trying to avoid causing alarm while still demonstrating their overwhelming tactical advantage. Any attempt at communication from the approaching vessels, she asked. Negative, ma'am. They're not responding to any of our standard hails, but they're also not jamming our communications or targeting our ships with active sensors. Elena arrived on the bridge, slightly out of breath from her sprint from the laboratory. Admiral, I was monitoring the signal analysis equipment when the contacts appeared. The same signature patterns we've been studying are emanating from those approaching ships. This is definitely the same force that destroyed the Draconian fleet. The next few minutes passed with agonizing slowness as the unknown contacts continued their approach. Zara found herself caught between her duty to protect her crews and her mission to gather intelligence about this mysterious force. Any attempt to flee would likely prove futile against technology that could eliminate Draconian battle fleets, but standing their ground might result in the complete loss of her task force. Ma'am, the communications officer called out, we're receiving a transmission. It's not on any standard frequency, but our computers are somehow able to interpret it. Put it through, Zara ordered, bracing herself for first contact with an intelligence that might determine humanity's fate. The bridge speakers crackled to life, but instead of alien voices or incomprehensible sounds, they heard something that shocked every person present. The transmission was in perfect, unaccented English. Terran vessels, this is the Ascendant Council ship Harmony of Understanding. We request permission to establish peaceful communication protocols. We mean you no harm. The bridge fell into stunned silence. After days of speculation about encountering incomprehensible alien intelligence, they were being addressed in their own language by entities that seemed to understand human diplomatic conventions. Zara recovered first, her training kicking in despite the surreal nature of the situation. Unknown vessel Harmony of Understanding, this is Admiral Zara Thorne of the Terran Federation Defense Force. We are conducting scientific research in this area and are prepared to engage in peaceful communication. Thank you, Admiral Thorne. We are aware of your research mission and the questions you seek to answer. With your permission, we would like to send a representative to your vessel to explain the recent events that have brought us together. Elena grabbed Zara's arm, her eyes wide with excitement and concern. Admiral, this could be the breakthrough we've been hoping for. If they're willing to explain what happened to the Draconian fleet directly. It could also be a trap, Commander Torres interjected grimly. We have no way of knowing their true intentions or capabilities. Zara weighed her options quickly. The approaching vessels had demonstrated that they could have destroyed her task force already if that had been their intention. Their offer of peaceful communication, while potentially deceptive, represented humanity's best chance of understanding what they were dealing with. Harmony of Understanding, we accept your offer of communication. However, I must inform you that any aggressive action against our vessels will be met with appropriate defensive measures. A sound that might have been gentle laughter came through the communications system. Admiral, we understand your caution, but we assure you that your defensive measures, while admirable in their intention, would prove ineffective against our technology. We have observed humanity's courage and determination over many years, and it is precisely those qualities that have led us to this moment. Within an hour, the main shuttle bay of the GSS Determination had been converted into a makeshift diplomatic reception area. Security teams were positioned at strategic points, though Zara suspected they would be more symbolic than functional if their visitors chose to demonstrate hostility. The shuttle that arrived was unlike anything in the Terran Federation's databases. It seemed to be constructed from a material that shifted between solid metal and translucent crystal, depending on the angle of observation. It moved without any visible propulsion system, gliding through the bay's atmospheric field with impossible grace. When the shuttle's boarding ramp extended, Zara found herself face to face with beings that challenged every assumption about alien life forms. The representatives appeared to be humanoid in basic structure, but their features suggested an evolutionary path that had diverged from humanity millions of years ago. Their skin had a subtle luminescence that seemed to pulse in rhythm with their heartbeats, and their eyes held an intelligence that spoke of vast knowledge and experience. Admiral Thorne, the lead figure, said, speaking in the same perfect English they had heard over the communications system. "I am Keeper Valdris of the Ascendant Council. We have traveled far to meet with you and your people." Zara stepped forward, drawing upon decades of diplomatic training despite the unprecedented nature of the situation. "Keeper Valdris, welcome aboard the GSS Determination. We are honored by your presence and eager to understand the events that have brought us together." Valdris inclined his head in what appeared to be a gesture of respect. "Admiral, your people have impressed us greatly with your resilience and moral courage in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. It is time you learned the truth about the forces that have shaped your development as a species." They moved to the ship's main briefing room, where Zara's senior staff waited with barely concealed anticipation. Valdris took a seat at the conference table with fluid grace, his luminescent features reflecting the soft lighting of the room. The Draconian Empire, Valdris began without preamble, was not merely an enemy of humanity. They were an agent of a malevolent force that has plagued this galaxy for eons, a force that seeks to corrupt and dominate all sentient life. Their destruction was not an act of aggression, but rather a necessary intervention to prevent a catastrophe that would have consumed countless worlds. Elena leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic protocol. "Are you saying the Draconians were being controlled by some external influence?" "Not controlled," Valdris replied, his expression growing grave. "Influenced. Shaped. The entity we know as the Void Shepherd has spent millions of years identifying species with potential for growth and systematically corrupting them, turning them into instruments of destruction and despair." The revelation hit the assembled officers like a physical blow. For generations, humanity had viewed the Draconian Empire as their ultimate enemy, a civilization driven by its own malevolent nature to dominate and destroy. Learning that they had been pawns of something even more sinister reframed everything they thought they knew about galactic politics. "What is this Void Shepherd?" Zara asked, her military mind already trying to process the tactical implications of facing an enemy that could corrupt entire civilizations. Valdris's eyes grew distant, as if he were seeing events from the deep past. "An intelligence from beyond our dimensional boundaries, seeking to transform our reality into something more suited to its needs. It cannot directly enter our space, but it can influence the development of species, gradually shaping them into tools for its ultimate purpose." "And that purpose is?" Commander Torres asked grimly. "The complete subjugation of all conscious life in this galaxy, followed by the transformation of our dimensional space into a realm of eternal suffering and despair. The Void Shepherd feeds on anguish and desperation, and it has been working for millions of years to create the perfect conditions for its eventual manifestation in our reality." The briefing room fell silent as everyone absorbed the magnitude of what they were being told. Humanity's struggle against the Draconian Empire had been just one small part of a cosmic conflict that spanned eons and threatened the very fabric of existence itself. "Why are you telling us this?" Zara asked finally. "And why intervene now, after allowing this influence to operate for so long?" Valdris smiled, an expression that somehow conveyed both sadness and hope. "Because, Admiral Thorne, humanity has demonstrated something that gives us reason for optimism. Despite facing overwhelming odds, despite suffering tremendous losses, your people have consistently chosen courage over despair, hope over resignation. You have proven resistant to the Void Shepherd's influence in ways that make you incredibly valuable allies in the fight against this ancient evil." The implications of his words began to sink in. Humanity wasn't just another potential victim in this cosmic struggle. They were potential weapons against an enemy that had been shaping galactic civilization for millions of years. The Ascendant Council, Valdris continued, consists of species that have successfully resisted the Void Shepherd's corruption and dedicated themselves to protecting others from its influence. We have been watching humanity's development for centuries, waiting to see if you would prove worthy of joining our cause.
And the test was watching us fight the Draconians? Elena asked. Among other challenges, yes. Your species' response to seemingly impossible odds, your refusal to abandon your principles even in the face of extinction, and your capacity for growth and adaptation have all been carefully observed. The destruction of the Draconian fleets was as much about protecting you from their final, most desperate gambit as it was about eliminating a corrupted tool of the Void Shepherd. Zara felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on her shoulders. Everything she had believed about humanity's place in the galaxy was being rewritten in the span of a single conversation. But, as overwhelming as the revelation was, she also felt something else. For the first time in decades, she felt hope that humanity might not have to face the darkness of space alone. The revelation that humanity had been unknowingly participating in a cosmic war against an interdimensional entity had sent shockwaves through the entire Terran Federation command structure. Admiral Chen had arrived aboard the GSS Determination within 18 hours of receiving Zara's initial report, accompanied by a full diplomatic delegation and enough military firepower to level a small moon. Yet even this impressive show of force seemed insignificant compared to the 12 Ascendant Council vessels that maintained their patient vigil around the debris field. Keeper Valdris had remained aboard the Determination as a gesture of good faith, though Zara suspected his presence was also meant to provide immediate communication with his people should the situation deteriorate. The alien diplomat had proven to be remarkably forthcoming about the true nature of galactic politics, painting a picture of reality that was far more complex and dangerous than anyone in the Terran Federation had imagined. The Void Shepherd's influence operates through what we call corruption seeds, Valdris explained to the assembled command staff in the ship's main briefing room. The holographic display showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, with certain star systems highlighted in ominous red markers. These are psychological and cultural influences that gradually reshape a species' development over thousands of years. Dr. Vasquez studied the display intently, her scientific mind racing to understand the implications. You're describing a form of mimetic warfare conducted on a galactic scale. An entity that can influence the very thoughts and beliefs of entire civilizations over geological time periods. That is an accurate assessment, Dr. Vasquez.
The Void Shepherd cannot directly manipulate individuals, but it can plant ideas, encourage certain cultural developments, and guide species toward behaviors that serve its ultimate purpose.
The Draconian Empire was one of its most successful projects. Admiral Chan leaned forward, his expression grim. Are you telling us that humanity has also been influenced by this entity? That our own development has been shaped by external forces? Valdris paused before answering, choosing his words carefully.
The Void Shepherd has certainly attempted to influence your species, Admiral Chen. But humanity has proven remarkably resistant to its corruption. Where other species gradually embrace domination, cruelty, and despair as core values, humans have consistently developed cultures that prize compassion, cooperation, and hope.
But we've had our share of wars and atrocities, Commander Torres pointed out. Human history is filled with examples of the worst kinds of behavior. Indeed, Valdris acknowledged. But observe how your species responds to such events. Rather than celebrating them as achievements, you remember them as tragedies. You develop institutions and cultural norms specifically designed to prevent their repetition. You teach your children that such behaviors are wrong, not natural or inevitable. This is the opposite of what the Void Shepherd seeks to achieve. Elena activated her portable display unit, showing the decoded communication signatures they had discovered in the debris field. Keeper Valdris, can you help us understand these patterns? We've identified them as markers left by your people, but their mathematical complexity suggests they contain much more information than simple identification. Valdris examined the patterns for several moments, his luminescent features shifting through what might have been expressions of approval and concern. These signatures serve multiple purposes, Dr. Vasquez. They identify our involvement in the Draconian fleet's destruction, yes, but they also contain warnings and historical data about the Void Shepherd's activities in this sector. Warnings about what? Zara asked. The destruction of the Fifth Fleet was not the end of the Draconian threat, Admiral Thorne. It was the prevention of something far worse.
Our intelligence indicated that the Draconians were preparing to deploy a weapon of unprecedented destructive capability, something that would have made their previous atrocities seem trivial by comparison. The holographic display shifted to show technical schematics that hurt to look at directly, as if the designs themselves were somehow wrong on a fundamental level. The assembled officers found themselves unconsciously looking away from the images. What kind of weapon could be worse than the planet killers they've already used? Admiral Chen asked, though his voice suggested he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. A reality destabilizer, Valdris replied grimly. A device capable of tearing holes in the fabric of dimensional space, creating permanent gateways that would allow the Void Shepherd to begin manifesting directly in our reality. The weapon was nearly complete when we intervened. The briefing room fell silent as everyone absorbed the magnitude of what had almost occurred. The Draconian Empire's defeat had always seemed like humanity's ultimate goal, but learning that it had prevented an even greater catastrophe reframed everything about their recent victory. "Where is this weapon now?" Torres asked. "Was it destroyed with the fleet?" Valdris's expression grew troubled. "That is unfortunately where our situation becomes more complicated. The reality destabilizer was not aboard any of the ships we destroyed. Our intelligence suggests it was hidden somewhere else, and the Draconian leadership was prepared to activate it as a final act of spite if their fleet was defeated." Admiral Chen stood up abruptly, his face pale. "Are you telling us there's still a doomsday weapon out there, ready to tear holes in reality itself?" "We believe so, yes. And, more concerning still, we have detected signs that other corrupted species are moving to claim the device for themselves. The Void Shepherd's influence extends far beyond the Draconian Empire, and there are civilizations that would eagerly use such a weapon to advance their own dark agendas." Elena pulled up her analysis of the galactic political situation, highlighting the various alien species that had demonstrated hostility toward humanity and other peaceful civilizations. The hegemony of Scars, the Machine Collective, the Entropy Cult, any of these groups would represent an existential threat if they gained access to reality destabilizing technology. Which brings us to why the Ascendant Council has chosen this moment to make contact with humanity, Valdris continued. "We need allies in the search for this weapon. Your species' resistance to the Void Shepherd's corruption makes you invaluable in operations where other civilizations might be compromised by the device's mere presence." Zara felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling even more heavily on her shoulders. "What exactly are you asking of us, Keeper Valdris?" "We are proposing a formal alliance between the Terran Federation and the Ascendant Council. In exchange for our protection from the corrupted species and access to advanced technologies that will accelerate your defensive capabilities, humanity would join our efforts to locate and neutralize the reality destabilizer before it can be used." The offer was staggering in its implications. Access to technology that could make humanity a major galactic power, protection from enemies they couldn't hope to face alone, and the chance to prevent a catastrophe that could consume entire dimensional planes. But it would also mean committing their entire civilization to a war that had been raging for millions of years against an enemy that existed beyond normal reality. "We'll need to discuss this with our government," Admiral Chen said carefully. "A decision of this magnitude requires approval from the highest levels of Terran leadership." "Of course," Valdris replied. "But I must warn you that time is not on our side. Our monitoring systems have detected increased activity from several corrupted species, all moving toward coordinates that suggest they have intelligence about the weapon's location. We estimate that we have perhaps weeks, not months, before someone attempts to claim the device." Dr. Vasquez raised her hand hesitantly. "Keeper Valdris, I have to ask, if the Ascendant Council has technology powerful enough to destroy entire fleets instantaneously, why do you need our help at all? Why not simply eliminate all the corrupted species and secure the weapon yourselves?" Valdris's expression grew sad, an emotion that seemed to resonate across the bridge between species. "Because, Dr. Vasquez, the corrupted species are not inherently evil. They are victims of the Void Shepherd's influence, just as the Draconians were. Our goal is not to eliminate them, but to break the hold that the interdimensional entity has over them. Some corrupted civilizations have been restored to their original nature, freed from the influence that had shaped their development for millennia. That's why humanity's resistance to corruption is so valuable," he continued. "You can operate in environments where the Void Shepherd's influence is strongest without losing your essential nature. You can make contact with corrupted species and potentially serve as examples of what they could become if freed from the entity's control." Elena leaned back in her chair, overwhelmed by the scope of what they were discussing.
You're talking about a form of galactic rehabilitation program. Instead of destroying civilizations that have been corrupted, you're trying to heal them. Precisely. And that healing process requires contact with species that have successfully resisted corruption. Humanity's natural compassion and determination make you ideal candidates for such work, assuming you choose to accept the risks involved. Commander Torres, ever practical, focused on the immediate tactical concerns. What kind of opposition would we face in searching for this reality destabilizer? Are we talking about conventional military threats or something more exotic? Both, I'm afraid, Valdris replied. The corrupted species possess advanced military technology, but they also carry fragments of the Void Shepherd's influence that can affect reality in localized areas. Ships that venture too close to their strongholds have reported equipment malfunctions, crew members experiencing nightmarish visions, and, in some cases, complete mental breakdowns among personnel. The implications sent a chill through everyone present. They were being asked to face enemies that could attack not just their ships and weapons, but their very minds and souls. However, Valdris continued, humanity's resistance to such influence appears to extend to these localized effects as well. In our observations, humans have demonstrated an unusual ability to maintain their psychological integrity even when exposed to concentrated corruption fields. Admiral Chen stood and walked to the viewport, staring out at the debris field that had started this entire chain of events. Keeper Valdris, assuming our government agrees to this alliance, what would be the first step? How do we begin searching for a weapon hidden somewhere in the galaxy? We have narrowed the search area considerably through analysis of Draconian communication intercepts and gravitational anomaly readings. The device appears to be hidden within the Shadowlands, a region of space that exists partially outside normal dimensional boundaries. It is a place where the Void Shepherd's influence is strongest, where reality itself becomes unstable. Elena felt her scientific excitement warring with deep apprehension. That sounds like it would be incredibly dangerous to explore, even with our resistance to corruption. It will be, Valdris admitted. Which is why we propose sending a joint expedition consisting of both Ascendant Council vessels and human ships. Your people's unique qualities, combined with our technological capabilities, represent the best chance of successfully locating and neutralizing the reality destabilizer. The meeting continued for several more hours, covering tactical details, technological specifications, and the complex logistics of coordinating a galactic-scale search operation. When it finally concluded, Zara found herself standing alone on the bridge of her ship, staring out at the stars and trying to process the magnitude of what humanity was being asked to undertake. Elena joined her after a few minutes, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing an expression that mixed excitement with profound concern. "Quite a day for first contact," she said, offering one of the cups to Zara. "I keep thinking about all the times we faced impossible odds," Zara replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. The siege of New Geneva, the Battle of Proxima, the long march from the Centauri colonies. Every time, we found a way to survive through sheer stubborn determination. "This feels different though," Elena said quietly. "Those were battles for territory or resources or political independence. This is a war for the very nature of reality itself." They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the debris field drift past the viewport. Somewhere in that twisted metal lay the remnants of an enemy that had plagued humanity for centuries, destroyed by allies they had never known existed in service of a conflict they had never imagined. "Do you think we'll accept their offer?" Elena asked. Zara considered the question carefully before answering. "I think we have to. Not just because of the immediate threat, but because of what it means for humanity's future. For the first time since we left Earth, we're being offered the chance to be part of something larger than our own survival. And if we can help heal civilizations that have been corrupted by this Void Shepherd, if we can actually make the galaxy a better place instead of just defending ourselves from it." Elena trailed off, but her meaning was clear. "Then, maybe all the struggles, all the losses, all the impossible battles we've fought will have been worth something more than just staying alive another day," Zara finished. As if summoned by their conversation, Admiral Chen's voice echoed across the bridge communication system. "All senior officers to the main briefing room. We've received word from Earth. The President has made his decision." Zara and Elena exchanged glances before heading toward what might be the most important meeting in human history. Behind them, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the cosmic drama playing out among the tiny beings that sought to understand their place in the vast, dangerous, and ultimately hopeful universe they called home.
In a few hours, humanity would either embark on the greatest adventure in their history or find themselves facing enemies beyond their wildest nightmares. But, whatever the decision, they would face it as they had faced every previous challenge, together, with courage, and, with an unshakable belief that even in the darkest corners of space, hope could still find a way to shine. The decision from Earth had been unanimous among the Terran Federation Council. Humanity would join the Ascendant Council in their ancient war against the Void Shepherd and its corrupted servants. Within 72 hours of that announcement, the largest fleet in human history had assembled at the coordinates where the Draconian Fifth Fleet had met its end, transforming the debris field into a staging ground for an expedition into the unknown.
Admiral Zara Thorne stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned flagship TSS Defiance, a vessel that represented the pinnacle of human engineering enhanced with Ascendant Council technology.
The ship's hull gleamed with adaptive armor that could shift between solid matter and energy fields, while its weapons systems incorporated principles of physics that human scientists were still struggling to understand. Most importantly, the entire vessel had been shielded against the psychological effects of Void Shepherd corruption, making it one of the few ships capable of operating safely in the Shadowlands. "Ma'am, final fleet status reports are coming in," announced Commander Sarah Chen, Admiral Chen's daughter and one of the most promising tactical officers in the Federation Navy. 18 heavy cruisers, 36 destroyers, and 42 support vessels, all retrofitted with Ascendant Council defensive systems. The joint science expedition includes 12 research vessels and enough supplies for a 6-month deployment. Zara nodded, studying the tactical display that showed their combined fleet alongside the Ascendant Council vessels. Keeper Valdris had brought additional ships from his people, sleek constructs that seemed to bend light around them and moved through space with impossible grace. The sight of human and alien vessels working in perfect coordination was something that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. "Any word from the advanced reconnaissance teams?" Zara asked. "Long-range scouts have confirmed the location of the Shadowlands boundary," reported Lieutenant Hayes from his station. "The dimensional distortion is visible from 3 light-years away. It's unlike anything in our databases, ma'am. Space itself appears to be wrong in that region." Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had been promoted to Chief Science Officer for the expedition, looked up from her analysis station. "The readings we're getting are consistent with Keeper Valdris's descriptions. The Shadowlands exist in a state of dimensional flux, where the barriers between our reality and the Void Shepherd's domain have been weakened by eons of corruption." Through the viewscreen, Zara could see the edge of normal space giving way to something that defied description. The stars seemed to flicker and twist, their light taking on colors that had no names in human language. Occasionally, shapes that might have been ships or might have been something far worse could be glimpsed moving through the distorted space before vanishing again into the cosmic maze. "Fleet Captain Morrison's reconnaissance group has reported contact with corrupted vessels along the boundary," Commander Chen announced. 3 ships of unknown configuration, possibly from the entropy cult. "They didn't engage, but they're definitely monitoring our approach." Valdris materialized on the bridge through what appeared to be a controlled teleportation effect, his luminescent features showing signs of strain. "Admiral Thorne, we've received intelligence from our deep monitoring stations. The reality destabilizer is not simply hidden in the Shadowlands. It has been integrated into a massive installation that the corrupted species have been building for decades." The implications sent a chill down Zara's spine. "You're saying they've known about the weapon's location all along? That this entire situation has been orchestrated?" "It appears so. The destruction of the Draconian Fifth Fleet may have been intended to draw us into this region of space, where the Void Shepherd's influence is strongest. We may be walking into a carefully prepared trap." Elena looked up from her analysis displays, her face pale. "Keeper Valdris, if that's true, then this expedition is exactly what our enemies want. They're trying to lure both human and Ascendant Council forces into their stronghold where they can corrupt or destroy us. The possibility has not escaped our consideration, Dr. Vasquez. However, we have little choice but to proceed. If the reality destabilizer is allowed to become operational within a corrupted installation, the consequences would be catastrophic for the entire galaxy." Admiral Zara absorbed this information while studying the tactical implications. Leading a fleet into what was essentially an interdimensional trap went against every principle of military strategy she had ever learned. But the alternative, allowing an entity from beyond reality to gain a foothold in their universe, was unthinkable. "Keeper Valdris, what can you tell us about the installation? Do we know its defensive capabilities or the number of ships protecting it?" Valdris activated a holographic display that showed a three-dimensional representation of something that hurt to look at directly. The installation appeared to exist in multiple dimensional phases simultaneously, making it difficult to determine where reality ended and corruption began. The structure spans approximately 50 kilometers in its primary dimensional phase, but it extends into parallel reality streams as well. Our estimates suggest it is protected by at least 200 corrupted vessels from various species, along with defensive systems that operate outside conventional physics.
Commander Chen studied the display with professional interest despite its disturbing nature.
Ma'am, a direct assault on a target like this would result in massive casualties, assuming it's even possible to succeed.
We'd need a different approach. Which is why humanity's unique resistance to corruption is so crucial, Valdris explained. Traditional military tactics are ineffective against an enemy that can turn your own weapons and personnel against you. But human crews have demonstrated the ability to maintain their integrity even when exposed to direct corruption fields.
Elena leaned forward, her scientific mind already working through the tactical possibilities.
You're suggesting we use human vessels as the primary assault force because we're the only ones who can function effectively in that environment? Not just function, Dr. Vasquez.
Thrive. In our observations, humans appear to become more determined and resourceful when facing seemingly impossible odds. The Void Shepherd's corruption feeds on despair and hopelessness, but humanity's response to such conditions is typically the opposite. The bridge fell silent as everyone contemplated the magnitude of what was being proposed. They would be leading the charge against an enemy installation that existed partially outside reality itself, protected by forces that could potentially drive other species insane with their mere presence. Admiral, Hayes called out from his station, "We're receiving a transmission from one of the corrupted vessels. They're trying to communicate with us." Zara felt her blood run cold. "Put it through, but keep the signal isolated from our main computer systems." The bridge speakers crackled to life with a sound that was almost human but wrong in fundamental ways. When the voice spoke, it carried harmonics that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the primitive fear centers of the brain.
"Human vessels, why do you resist the inevitable? Your species could be elevated beyond your current limitations, transformed into something greater than mere flesh and consciousness. The Void Shepherd offers gifts beyond your comprehension." Several bridge officers shifted uncomfortably, but Zara noted with satisfaction that none of them showed signs of the psychological breakdown that corrupted transmissions were supposed to cause. Humanity's resistance to the Void Shepherd's influence appeared to be holding even under direct exposure. "This is Admiral Zara Thorne of the Terran Federation," she responded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had faced impossible odds before. "We're not interested in your gifts. We're here to prevent you from using the reality destabilizer, and we won't be deterred by psychological warfare." The sound that came through the speakers might have been laughter, if laughter could convey the despair of eons. "Admiral Thorne, your species' stubborn defiance has been observed and recorded. It is precisely why you must be dealt with before the final phase can begin. You represent a contamination in the Void Shepherd's grand design." "Then, you'd better bring everything you've got," Zara replied grimly, "because humanity doesn't back down from bullies, no matter how cosmic their ambitions might be." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Outside the view screen, the corrupted vessels had begun moving into attack formations, their twisted hulls reflecting the impossible light of the Shadowlands in patterns that seemed to shift when observed directly. "All ships, this is Admiral Thorne," Zara announced over the fleet communication system. "We are about to engage hostile forces that represent everything humanity has always stood against. They offer subjugation disguised as evolution, despair masked as wisdom, and the end of free will presented as transcendence." She paused, looking around the bridge at the faces of her crew, seeing in them the same determination that had carried humanity through every previous crisis. "We've faced impossible odds before. We've been outgunned, outnumbered, and written off as extinct by enemies who thought they understood us. But here we are, about to take the fight to the very source of cosmic evil itself. We do this not just for our own survival, but for every species in the galaxy that deserves the chance to choose their own destiny." The fleet began moving forward into the Shadowlands, human vessels advancing alongside their Ascendant Council allies toward an enemy that had shaped galactic history for millions of years. The space around them grew increasingly distorted as they approached the corrupted installation, reality bending and twisting in ways that challenged the very concepts of up and down, forward and backward. "Ma'am," Elena reported from her science station, "the dimensional distortions are increasing exponentially as we approach the installation."
I'm reading energy signatures that don't correspond to any known physics.
Whatever that thing is, it's actively rewriting the laws of reality in its immediate vicinity. Weapons range in 2 minutes, Commander Chen announced.
All ships report ready for engagement, though I'm not sure how effective conventional weapons will be against targets that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Keeper Valdris moved to stand beside Zara at the command station.
Admiral, once the battle begins, the Void Shepherd's influence will intensify dramatically.
Your crews will be exposed to corrupting forces that have broken the minds of entire civilizations. Are you certain your people are prepared for what they're about to face? Zara looked out at the impossible vista of the Shadowlands, where her fleet was about to engage enemies that threatened the very nature of existence itself. The rational part of her mind screamed that this was insanity, that no force in the universe could successfully assault an installation that existed outside normal reality. But, the part of her that had spent decades fighting for humanity's survival against overwhelming odds felt something different. It felt the same stubborn determination that had carried her species from a single world to an interstellar civilization, the same refusal to accept defeat that had seen them through every crisis they had ever faced. Keeper Valdris, she said finally, humanity has been preparing for this fight since the first time one of our ancestors looked up at the stars and decided we belonged out there with them. We didn't come this far just to be corrupted by some interdimensional parasite with delusions of godhood. As the first shots of the battle began to light up the twisted space of the Shadowlands, Admiral Zara Thorne smiled grimly and prepared to show the forces of cosmic despair exactly why humanity had never learned to surrender. The battle for the corrupted installation had raged for 18 hours, transforming the Shadowlands into a hellscape of twisted metal, impossible energies, and reality distortions that defied every law of physics humanity had ever discovered. The TSS Defiance limped through the chaos, its adaptive armor scarred by weapons that attacked the very concept of matter itself, while around it the combined human and Ascendant Council fleet fought against enemies that seemed to multiply even as they were destroyed. Admiral Zara Thorne gripped the command station as another wave of dimensional distortion washed over her ship, causing the bridge lights to flicker between normal illumination and colors that had no names. Through the viewscreen, she could see the massive installation that housed the reality destabilizer, its impossible geometry shifting and writhing like a living thing in the center of the corrupted fleet's formation. Damage report, she called out over the sounds of alarms and weapons fire. Hull integrity holding at 60%, Commander Chen reported, her voice strained but steady. We've lost main sensors and half our defensive systems, but the weapons arrays are still functional. The Ascendant Council upgrades are the only reason we're still intact. Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from her science station, her face illuminated by displays showing energy readings that pushed her equipment beyond its design limits. Admiral, I'm detecting massive power fluctuations from the installation. They're preparing to activate the reality destabilizer. The implications hit everyone on the bridge like a physical blow. After hours of desperate fighting, they had failed to prevent their enemies from completing their ultimate objective. Soon, holes would be torn in the fabric of reality itself, allowing the Void Shepherd to begin manifesting directly in their universe. Time until activation? Zara asked grimly. Based on the energy buildup patterns, approximately 12 minutes, Elena replied. Once the device reaches full power, the dimensional barriers will collapse and... She trailed off, unable to voice the catastrophic consequences. Keeper Valdris materialized on the bridge, his luminescent features showing signs of damage from the cosmic forces they had been battling. Admiral, my people's vessels are reporting similar readings. The corrupted species have successfully integrated the reality destabilizer with their installation's power systems. We cannot prevent the activation through conventional assault. Zara studied the tactical display showing the positions of their remaining ships. They had lost nearly a third of the fleet in the assault, with many more vessels too damaged to continue effective combat operations. The corrupted forces, meanwhile, seemed to replenish themselves from some inexhaustible source, as if the installation itself was generating new enemies faster than they could be destroyed. Options, she demanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who refused to accept defeat even in the face of cosmic annihilation. We could attempt to ram the installation with one of our heavy cruisers, Commander Chen suggested. If we overloaded the ship's reactor at the moment of impact, the explosion might disrupt their power systems. The dimensional shielding around the installation would prevent such an attack from being effective, Valdris replied sadly. And, the loss of life would be enormous for minimal tactical benefit. Elena suddenly looked up from her displays, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and inspiration. Admiral, there might be another way.
The reality destabilizer works by creating resonance patterns that weaken dimensional boundaries.
But, if we could generate an opposing frequency, we might be able to stabilize reality instead of destabilizing it.
How would we generate such a frequency? Zara asked.
By using the installation's own power against it. If I could access their central computer systems and reverse the polarity of the dimensional field generators.
That would require someone to physically infiltrate the installation, Commander Chen pointed out. It's suicide. The corruption levels inside that thing would drive any normal person insane within minutes. But humans have demonstrated resistance to corruption, Valdris added thoughtfully.
And Dr. Vasquez has the technical expertise to understand systems based on principles her own people didn't develop.
It might actually be possible.
Zara looked around the bridge at her crew, seeing in their faces the same determination that had carried humanity through every impossible challenge they had ever faced. The plan was insane, requiring them to board an enemy installation that existed partially outside reality itself, but it represented their only hope of preventing cosmic catastrophe.
Elena, are you willing to attempt this mission? Zara asked quietly. Dr. Vasquez met her friend's gaze steadily. I've been studying their technology for weeks, trying to understand how they can manipulate reality itself.
If anyone can figure out how to turn their own weapons against them, it's me.
You won't be going alone, Zara decided.
I'll lead a boarding party of volunteers. If we're going to infiltrate that installation, we'll need military support to get you to their central systems. The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity as the boarding party was assembled and equipped with the most advanced protection humanity and the Ascendant Council could provide. 18 volunteers stepped forward, each of them understanding that they were embarking on a mission from which they might never return. The assault shuttle that carried them toward the installation was unlike any vessel in the Terran Federation inventory. Its hull incorporated Ascendant Council technology designed to maintain dimensional stability, while its interior was shielded with quantum fields that provided protection against corruption effects. Even so, Zara could feel the wrongness pressing against her mind as they approached their target. "Boarding point identified," announced the shuttle pilot, her voice tight with concentration.
"The installation's outer hull has several breach points from our previous attacks. I can get you inside, but extraction is going to depend on you completing the mission."
The installation's interior was a nightmare of twisted architecture that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Corridors stretched away in directions that didn't correspond to normal space, while the walls pulsed with veins of energy that hurt to look at directly. The boarding party moved through this maze with weapons ready, following Elena's readings toward the central computer complex.
They encountered resistance almost immediately.
Corrupted beings that might once have been members of various species attacked them from impossible angles, their forms twisted by eons of exposure to the Void Shepherd's influence. But the boarding party pressed forward, their human determination proving stronger than the fear and despair that radiated from their enemies. "Central computer complex is just ahead," Elena reported, checking her instruments as they approached a chamber that seemed to exist in a state of constant flux between solid matter and pure energy.
"The dimensional field generators are integrated into the reality destabilizer's control systems. If I can access them, I should be able to reverse their polarity." The computer interface that Elena found was unlike anything she had ever encountered. It responded to thoughts as much as touch, requiring her to maintain perfect mental discipline while navigating systems that operated according to principles of corrupted physics. Around her, the boarding party fought to hold the chamber against waves of enemies that emerged from dimensional rifts in the walls themselves. "Elena, how much longer do you need?"
Zara called out over the sounds of weapons fire and the inhuman screams of their attackers.
"Almost there. I'm accessing the dimensional field matrix now.
Just need to wait, there's something else here. Some kind of message embedded in the system." Despite the chaos around her, Elena paused to examine the data stream she had discovered. Hidden within the installation's computer systems was a communication from the original builders, members of species that had been corrupted by the Void Shepherd eons ago. "Admiral, you need to hear this," Elena said, activating her communication system so the message could be transmitted back to the fleet. "It's from the civilizations that built this place, before they were fully corrupted."
The message that emerged from the alien computer systems was heartbreaking in its simplicity.
It spoke of species that had once been peaceful and curious, exploring the galaxy with the same wonder and determination that characterized humanity's expansion into space. But they had encountered the Void Shepherd's influence, and, over millennia, they had been transformed into tools of cosmic destruction. The final part of the message was a plea to whoever might eventually discover their work, find a way to break the cycle of corruption, to free the galaxy from the Void Shepherd's influence, and to prevent other species from suffering their fate. Elena, the dimensional destabilizer is reaching critical power levels, Valdris's voice crackled through the communication system.
You must complete the reversal now.
Elena's fingers flew over the impossible interface, implementing changes to systems that operated according to corrupted physics while the battle raged around her. The installation's walls began to pulse with increasing intensity as the reality destabilizer prepared for activation, reality itself groaning under the strain of forces that sought to tear it apart.
Got it, Elena announced as the field polarity began to reverse. The dimensional generators are now stabilizing reality instead of destabilizing it. But the power feedback is building toward a catastrophic overload. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Throughout the installation, the twisted architecture began to straighten as normal physics reasserted itself. The corrupted beings attacking the boarding party suddenly stopped, their forms becoming more recognizable as the influence that had twisted them was temporarily suppressed. All ships, this is Admiral Thorne, Zara announced over the fleet communication system.
The reality destabilizer has been neutralized and converted into a stabilization field.
Begin immediate evacuation procedures.
This installation is going to tear itself apart. The escape from the installation was a harrowing race against time as the power systems overloaded and dimensional rifts began opening throughout the structure. The boarding party fought their way back to their shuttle while around them the installation consumed itself in a cascade of energetic feedback that lit up the Shadowlands like a newborn star. When the explosion finally came, it was unlike anything anyone had ever witnessed. The installation didn't just explode, it unraveled, taking with it the dimensional distortions that had plagued this region of space for eons.
The Shadowlands themselves began to clear as normal physics reasserted control over the area. Hours later, aboard the TSS Defiance, Zara stood before a holographic display showing the aftermath of their mission. The corrupted installation was gone, the reality destabilizer neutralized, and the immediate threat to galactic civilization had been eliminated. But, more importantly, the dimensional stabilization field had apparently affected the corrupted species throughout the region. Admiral, Elena reported, exhaustion evident in her voice but excitement shining in her eyes, were receiving communications from ships throughout the former battle zone. The corrupted species, they're remembering who they were before the Void Shepherd's influence took hold. The stabilization field appears to have broken the entity's control over them. The confirmation came from Keeper Valdris, who appeared on the bridge with an expression of wonder that transcended species barriers. Admiral Thorne, what your people have accomplished here goes far beyond preventing a single catastrophe.
You have demonstrated that the Void Shepherd's corruption can be reversed, that civilizations lost to its influence for millions of years can be restored to their original nature.
The implications were staggering.
For the first time in cosmic history, there was hope not just for defeating the Void Shepherd, but for healing the damage it had caused across the galaxy. Zara looked out at the stars, now shining clearly in space that had been twisted by corruption for eons. Humanity had come to investigate the destruction of their greatest enemy and discovered instead that they had a role to play in the salvation of the entire galaxy. In the distance, former enemy ships were already beginning to form new alliances, their crews remembering the civilizations they had been before corruption took hold. The war against the Void Shepherd was far from over, but, for the first time in millions of years, victory seemed possible. And it had been achieved not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through the most human of qualities, the stubborn refusal to accept that evil was inevitable, and the unwavering belief that even in the darkest corners of space, hope could always find a way to shine.